Here is the recap of the first, second, and third seasons of Only Murders in the Building.
The series is set in an apartment building in New York called Arconia. We are introduced to the three main characters. Charles is a retired actor who played a detective in a not very popular TV show. Oliver is a director of Broadway productions who has been struggling financially lately. And Mabel is a young girl who has come to visit her aunt in Arconia to renovate her apartment. One night someone pulls the fire alarm and the residents have to evacuate. The three neighbors, who have only met in the elevator, decide to get acquainted, and it turns out that they listen to the same crime podcast. Back in Arconia, they learn that there has been a murder in the house. The curious heroes decide to sneak by and look at the incident. It turns out their neighbor Tim Kono was murdered, and they saw him in the elevator a couple hours ago. Furthermore, Detective Williams says that the man took his own life. However, the heroes doubt it, as a lot of evidence disproves it. For example, an unknown guy in a light-colored hoodie, who at the time of the emergency alarm went up to the floor of the murdered man, or a missing garbage bag. They then decide to create their own podcast where they will investigate the murder on live. We learn that Mabel actually knew Tim Kono. When they were kids, they used to play detectives in this building, and when they grew up they met another couple, Zoe and Oscar. One Christmas day, their friend fell off the roof. Tim told the police that he saw her boyfriend Oscar push her off. However, Mabel knew he was lying. Oscar was sent to jail, and the heroine stopped communicating with Tim Kono. In the present, the heroes try to find out more about the victim and sneak into his apartment. On the floor, they find the bloody prints of their neighbor Howard's cat and make him the prime suspect. Meanwhile, Mabel finds a bunch of jewelry in Tim's apartment, but doesn't tell her friends about it. The heroes visit Howard, but it turns out he couldn't have committed the murder because he is very afraid of blood. We learn that his cat died for some reason while visiting Tim's apartment. Howard thinks that she could have been poisoned, but the heroes do not give his words any weight. Oliver is still struggling with money and visits his old friend Teddy, who also lives in Arconia. The hero convinces him to sponsor their podcast, and eventually Teddy agrees. However, upon returning home, the man finds a mysterious note telling them to stop investigating. Furthermore, someone has poisoned his dog, and Oliver gives it to his son Will, who works as a veterinarian. At this time, the lonely Charles meets a neighbor from Arconia named Jen, and feelings flare up between them. Soon the hero's podcast picks up steam, but the investigation hits a dead end. Oliver, Charles, and Mabel go to Cinda Canning, the podcaster they've been listening to for a long time. They ask her for advice, and she gives them a clue on how to track down the killer. But we soon find out that the eager Cinda also starts recording a podcast about the murder. Soon Mabel is being stalked by the guy in the light-colored hoodie, but he turns out to be her childhood friend Oscar, who was sent to prison for 10 years because of Tim's testimony. At first she suspects him of killing Tim, but trusting her gut, she realizes it's not him. A little earlier, in Tim's stuff, Mabel finds a note with the date and place of the meeting, after which she heads there. At the same time, Oliver and Charles learn that Mabel knew Tim, but did not tell them about it, after which they begin to follow her. All the heroes find themselves in a tattoo parlor, where Tim Kono was supposed to meet someone. Mabel confesses to the heroes that she knew the murdered man and tells them about their past, after which they continue to investigate. It turns out that Tim was supposed to meet a man who was selling him jewelry, but the heroes don't understand why he was buying so much of it. Detective Williams is not happy with the characters hosting the podcast and challenging the police investigation. She once again checks the evidence and discovers some inconsistencies. The woman realizes that she will not be allowed to reopen the case for no reason, so she secretly sends Tim Kono's phone to the heroes to continue the investigation. Soon the heroes receive another check from Teddy, and Oscar notices that the name of the man's company is Angel. It is from this company that Tim has been purchasing jewelry. The heroes then make Teddy the prime suspect. They sneak into his apartment and find a secret room with urns, inside of which jewelry is hidden. It turns out Teddy has a funeral business, and he steals jewelry from the dead and then sells it. Oliver and Mabel head there to gather more evidence. There they meet Teddy's deaf son named Theo, who helps his father in his dark business. The guy kidnaps both of them and brings them to Teddy, who threatens the couple and orders them to stop investigating. The heroes return to Arconia. Finally, they find the password to Dimkono's phone, and we find out what exactly happened 10 years ago. Turns out the deaf guy Theo knew Zoe and was even in love with her. He gave her an expensive ring that his father had taken off another corpse. Teddy saw this and ordered his son to return the ring. On Christmas night, Theo informs Zoe about it. They quarrel, and the girl accidentally falls off the roof. Tim witnesses it, and Teddy threatens the guy, after which he gives false testimony. For years, Tim has been trying to expose the villains and find the ring that would serve as evidence against them. That is why he bought up jewelry. After learning about this, the heroes decide to release the latest episode of the podcast, where they will reveal the real criminals. Everything goes according to plan. Teddy and his son Theo are arrested. However, it turns out that although they are guilty of stealing jewelry from corpses, as well as covering up a 10-year-old crime, they are not involved in the murder of Dimkono, and there is strong evidence to prove it. At this point, Charles goes to visit Jen and finds her lying on the floor with a stab wound, but she survives. Detective Williams does do a toxicology test on the deceased's blood. She discovers that he was poisoned and informs the heroes. Meanwhile, Bunny, the head of the housing committee of Arconia, holds a meeting of residents. As a result of the vote, the heroes are going to be evicted from their apartments. While Charles goes to Jen's performance, where she plays the bassoon, Oliver and Mabel continue to investigate. They learn that Tim had a lover from Arconia, and they start going through the deceased's personal stuff. The heroes accidentally stumble upon a strange riff and realize that it is from a musical instrument called a bassoon. Oliver and Mabel figure out that the killer is Jen, and she killed Tim just out of jealousy. They run to Charles' apartment, where they find him paralyzed, but alive. Going down to the basement, the heroes see that Jen is trying to poison the whole house by putting a poisonous substance down the chimney. The trio of detectives stop the woman, and she is arrested by the police. Afterwards, the residents honor them as heroes. Mabel, Oliver, and Charles record the latest episode of the podcast, then go to celebrate on the roof. A girl goes to get champagne, and suddenly the men receive a mysterious message advising them to go outside. They run after Mabel and find her sitting in blood by Benny's corpse. That's when the police burst in and arrest the heroes. This is overseen by podcaster Cinda Canning and her assistant Becky. This is the end of the first season. If you've listened all the way up here, you like what I do. So subscribe to my channel, like this video, and write some comments. The main characters Mabel, Oliver, and Charles are interrogated by detectives Krebs and Williams. They are then released because Bunny was killed with a knife and it was not found at the scene of the crime. Plus, Williams doesn't believe the heroes could be involved. Back home, they discover that Cinda Canning recorded a podcast about them and made them look bad. So the trio of detectives decide to record a second season and tell their story while solving a new crime. Sneaking into Bunny's apartment, they find out that she had some very valuable painting that someone stole. Returning to Charles, they find it at his house and realize that the criminal wants to set them up. At the memorial service, they meet an elderly woman who informs them that she is the rightful owner of the painting. However, when the heroes show her the painting, she says that it is a reproduction. The woman asks to find the original and leaves. We are shown Benny's last day before her death. We learn that the woman had met a few days earlier at a cafe with a person who wanted to buy the painting, but Bunny refused. She was also going to leave her position as head of the Arconia Housing Committee and give the position to her successor, Nina, but changed her mind at the last minute. The heroes learn about all this and begin to suspect Nina. but soon become convinced that it is not her. Meanwhile, Mabel gets acquainted with the artist Alice, and feelings flare up between them. However, one day the heroine catches her friend at the reconstruction of Bunny's murder and realizes that the girl simply wanted to profit from this story, although Alice swears that it is not so. Meanwhile, to Charles comes Lucy, daughter of his old acquaintance, with whom they spent a lot of time, and Lucy is like a relative for him. She shows the heroes the secret passages behind the walls of Arconia, and they realize how the criminal managed to plant the painting and also to get away unnoticed from the scene of the crime. One day Oliver meets Teddy in the elevator, who, along with his son Theo, has been released under house arrest for the duration of the investigation. Oliver soon learns that his son Will is actually Teddy's son, as his wife has cheated on him in the past. However, towards the end of the season, Oliver and Will agree that it doesn't change anything. Meanwhile, Charles still has feelings for Jan and meets her in prison. However, towards the end of the season, he decides to break up with her and start going on dates, which he has been avoiding all this time. The heroes discover a matchbox with a fingerprint that may have been left by the killer and try to contact Detective Williams. The woman doesn't answer the phone, but sends a message for them to leave the evidence in the park. The heroes find this suspicious and decide to make a glitter bomb, then figure out who will try to pick up the package. The suspect falls for their trick, but he manages to escape. That evening, Mabel returns home. She is attacked by a man in glitter and takes away the bag with the evidence, but the girl manages to wound him with a knitting needle. Mabel also goes to podcaster Cinda Canning to ask her to stop besmirching their names. There she finds her assistant Becky, who is oppressed by the supervisor, and the girl tells some secrets about her boss. The next day, Mabel meets Theo, who, like his father, has been released on bail. Theo wants to atone for his sins and intends to help the heroine find the criminal. They manage to recover the bag, but the matchbox has already disappeared from it. In the evening, the lights go out in Arconia, and the trio of heroes hurry to Charles's apartment, as they fear that the killer may attack Lucy. However, the girl manages to hide from the criminal in the secret tunnels of the building. When the lights come on, the heroes meet Detective Krebs, and Mabel notices glitter on him. The next day she finds him at the gym and tries to get him to talk, but he won't spill. The girl guesses that he is too stupid to set up such a crime and assumes that he is working with Cinda Canning. The heroes think this couple is setting up murders and record podcasts just the way they want them to. Oliver, Charles, and Mabel decide to organize a party where they will announce on air who the killer really is. They call Cinda Canning and her assistant Becky, as well as the artist Alice. The characters put on quite a show. At first we think that the criminal is Cinda, but then they blame it on Alice. Since it was she who wanted to buy the painting from Bunny, the original of which the heroes did find. The girl takes out a knife and kills Charles. However, in the end it turns out that it was all set up to Becky to talk and confess to the murder. Turns out she hated her boss because she underestimated her. Becky wanted to do her own podcast, and together with her lover Detective Krebs killed Bunny, framing the characters. Oliver, Charles, and Mabel expose the killers again, after which the villains are arrested. A year later, Oliver puts on a play on Broadway, during the premiere of which someone kills the lead actor. This is the end of the second season.
Even before the actor's death, we learn that Oliver has decided to do a Broadway play called Death Rattle. Ben gets the lead role in it, an unbelievable asshole who sits on a strict diet, and his unfortunate brother Dickie has to clean up after him forever. Charles is also in this play, as well as other actors. Oliver still cannot find a person for the role of Nanny and suddenly discovers Loretta, in whom he immediately notices the talent. But it turns out that she has never played anywhere before. The play is being paid for by two big-name producers, Donna and her son Cliff. But Mabel doesn't know what to do next, as there are no more murders in Arconia, and her old men are up to their necks in their work. After 4 months of rehearsals, Death Rattle launches on Broadway, and then, During the opening night, Ben drops dead. The show is canceled and all the characters go to Oliver's apartment to discuss the future of the play. Suddenly, Ben returns and reports that the doctors have pumped him out, saying he was poisoned by something. Ben apologizes to everyone for acting like a jerk all these months, but really continues to act like a total asshole. The main characters are shocked, but glad that their play is in no danger. In the evening, Oliver, Charles, and Mabel head out for a bite to eat. They go down in the elevator, which until a few hours ago did not work, as suddenly the ceiling breaks through and Ben's corpse falls from above. The old men call the police and Mabel takes pictures of the crime as she realizes their podcast is starting a new season. Mabel notices from the photos that Ben had a hanky in his hands before he died. That's the kind of hanky the actor gave to everyone in the production. This means that the deceased grabbed it from someone before his death, and now the entire staff of the play is under suspicion. The main characters go to the funeral, where Charles and Mabel meet a man who claims to have clues to Ben's murder. They go to his house, but it turns out to be the actor's cuckoo stalker. He ties up the main characters and intends to torture them, as he is sure that they killed his idol. Then the police burst in and arrest the psycho, believing that they have solved the case. However, Mabel is not sure about this, as the stalker also had a hanky, which means that it could not have been in Ben's hands. At this time, Oliver learns that a very famous critic was going to write a negative review of their production, and all because of their lead actor Ben, who showed himself not at his best. After this news, Oliver has a heart attack, but soon the doctors release him from the hospital. Oliver realizes that the play in its current form can't be saved, so he changes the concept and is going to make Death Rattle into a musical. Producer Donna is not thrilled about this, but her son Cliff agrees to the musical as he adores them. Meanwhile, Mabel and Charles continue to investigate. They determine two facts: Ben's initial poisoning had something to do with his death, and also that the killer most likely does not have the hanky in his possession. Mabel goes to the deceased's apartment and meets Tobert, Ben's cameraman, who was filming a documentary about him. They develop an affection for each other, and the guy tells Mabel that he has a tape from Ben's dressing room right before he was poisoned. It shows the deceased talking to someone who is not in the frame. Ben says he wishes for the other person with all his soul, but knows it could ruin his career. Charles has to rap in the musical, and he can't help himself. Every time he gets nervous, he freaks out. Charles attributes it to the fact that he's recently moved in with his old makeup artist, Joy. He loves her, but he is not comfortable living with another person, as he is used to being alone. Soon Charles tries to find out which of the actors doesn't have a hanky and realizes that only one actress doesn't have one. And Mabel thinks that she and Ben had an affair and it was her he talked to in the dressing room. But it turns out she didn't kill him, and she simply sold the hanky. The main characters go into the dressing room of the late Ben and see on the mirror the inscription "F***ing pig" written in lipstick. Back home, it turns out that the lipstick belonged to makeup artist Joy. Charles tries to find out if Joy was involved in Ben's murder. It turns out that she was really in his dressing room before the poisoning, but in fact she was just doing her job and simply lost her lipstick. With these questions, Charles ruins the relationship with Joy and they break up. Meanwhile, Mabel tries to find out why there is no mention in the police reports that Ben was poisoned. It turns out that his brother Dickie cleaned up all traces of poisoning, as Ben also used illegal substances, and it could affect his career. Mabel and cameraman Robert begin to suspect Ben's understudy, but it turns out that this is also a dead end. Meanwhile, Oliver falls in love with actress Loretta, who plays the nanny. He has dinner at her house, and they even sleep together. When the woman goes to shower, Oliver looks around her room and finds a photo album with newspaper clippings with Ben. Oliver realizes that Loretta was obsessed with him. It also reveals the fact that she and Ben had a fight right before the premiere. Charles discovers that their neighbor Uma has stolen the very same hanky from the crime scene, as she is a kleptomaniac. Charles spends an entire episode trying to retrieve it, however the woman sells it at auction for several $1,000s. As we find out later, it was bought by Dickie, Ben's brother. At this time, Mabel discovers that Dickie was adopted. He has always been in the shadow of his more successful brother and could hold a grudge against him. Soon there are misunderstandings between the main characters over investigation, work, and personal life. Mabel realizes that the old people are not paying proper attention to their podcast and decides to release an episode without them. In it, she shares the result of the investigation. This is heard by the detectives on the case, and since that stalker did turn out to be innocent, the police start looking for the killer again. We learn that Loretta is actually Dickie's mother, and that the photo album was not about Ben, but about her son, who was also in the photos beside the star. When she was young, she foolishly gave up her child and regretted it for the rest of her life. She later found her son, but did not dare to admit it to him. When she learned that Ben and Dickie would be in Oliver's play, she made every effort to also be an actress in this production to be closer to her child. In the present, Loretta finally wants to tell Dickie the truth, but that's when the police show up. They demand that the actors stop rehearsing and take turns giving their testimony. Just then, the main characters reconcile and decide to act together. They slip a camera into the room where the interrogation will take place in order to find the missing pieces of the puzzle. After interrogating all the cast and staff of the play, Loretta sees Dickie being approached by police officers. She suspects that he may be accused of Ben's murder, so she confesses to the detectives that she is the one who killed him. The main characters soon learn that Dickie had an alibi and could not have committed the crime. They find a letter from Loretta addressed to Dickie and realize that she is his mother. Mabel, Charles, and Oliver, having all the videos from the interrogation, begin to recreate the last 30 minutes before Ben collapsed on stage after being poisoned. They eventually realize that Ben wrote the insult on the mirror about himself because he ate a cookie and he is on a strict diet. It was to the cookie that his words were addressed that he desires it with all his soul, but knows it could ruin his career. The main characters guess that the cookies were poisoned and recall that similar cookies were given to everyone by Donna, the play's producer. The trio concludes that she then learned of a future smashing review of Death Rattle. And since her son Cliff's career as a producer depended on this production, she decided to poison Ben. She knew that if he died, the show would end and the review would not be published. Oliver and company managed to make it to the courthouse, where he convinces his lover Loretta not to confess to the crime, since they know who the killer really is. The main characters realize that they lack Donna's confession of murder to complete their podcast season. On the day of the musical's premiere, they show her the evidence, including the hanky they took from Dickie. It shows traces of lipstick, and Donna just happens to wipe her lips in a similar manner on napkins and hankies. Surprisingly, Donna admits that she first tried to poison Ben by adding rat poison to the cookies, and then threw him down an open elevator shaft. She asks only one thing: to end tonight's show so that the critics will write good reviews and her son's career will not be threatened. The main characters agree, but Mabel begins to suspect that something is not right here. She notices that after talking to his mother, Cliff goes somewhere in upset feelings. She follows him and realizes that although it was Donna who tried to poison Ben, it was Cliff who pushed him down the elevator shaft. It turns out that night Ben guessed that it was Donna who slipped him the poisoned cookies and was going to turn her in to the police. Then Cliff, protecting his mother, threw him down. And the hanky ended up in the guy's possession, as he had previously taken it from his mother. Now Cliff is about to end his life, but eventually Donna stops him. And after the resounding success of the musical, the couple are arrested. Loretta finally admits to Dickie that she is his mother, and he has actually been guessing it all along. That evening, everyone gathers at the Arconia to celebrate the success of the play. Loretta informs Oliver that she is going to go to Los Angeles to film, since she is now quite famous. And Tobert will also go there for work. At first, the main characters wanted to join their soulmates, but still decided to continue doing their podcast and stay in New York. Saz drops by the party. She is Charles' stuntwoman who has appeared throughout the seasons and helps sort out his personal life. She asks Charles to help her with a problem. At night, she goes to Charles' house, and in the dark, someone shoots her through the window. This is the end of the 3rd season. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the like button. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.